Characters are a vital part of any story. A good character may even be more memorable than the story they're from. I think a lot of success in the Marvel Cinematic Universe is owed to creating endearing, interesting, and accurate characters. Even if certain movies fell flat, the characters remained so memorable that they drew in massive crowds and became cultural icons. Video games do characters in a very different way. The most memorable characters in video games, at least the ones most generally recognized by the public, are fairly consistent. We have Mario, Pikachu, Pac-Man, Sonic, Luigi, Princess Peach, and so on. And while these characters are certainly memorable and endearing, obviously, they aren't by any means deep or complex. It then becomes a matter of context and the characters that match the game to create a cohesive video game experience. As always, it's important to look at the differences of video games compared to any other storytelling medium. Considering the potential length for a game, characters can stay around for tens or even hundreds of hours, which gives the player a unique and extended view of the character. In a movie, the character arc needs to be resolved within 2 or 3 hours, whereas games, especially JRPGs, can have upwards of 60 hours, or even go beyond that. Then the game has to keep the character relevant for that period of time. Characters can also be developed by their interactions with the world. Games like Grease give us a silent protagonist, but one that still grows and evolves by engaging with the world. Even though it's a short game, only about 4 hours, each moment is a focused drive into the main character's world. We feel her frustration and depression through carefully crafted and abstract set pieces. In this case, the world is what helps us understand the character. The game uses these set pieces to make the player feel a variety of emotions, from depression to hopeful optimism, and through this we understand the character. In a 3-arc story, characters are forced into very similar arcs, even if they are deeply personal arcs. For a game, however, there's so much more variety in how characters can be explored. In a game with a lot of characters, say Xenoblade Chronicles 2, it then becomes just a weave of characters. Each character ebbs and flows into personal moments in a way that feels natural, while still giving each character a moment that is relevant to the story. It's almost like a musical number. One instrument, or character, comes in for their moment within the context of the story or the musical number as a whole. Then the next instrument comes in and transitions while still continuing the piece and pushing it forward. For most of the piece, all the instruments play together, with certain instruments performing crescendos and decrescendos from foreground to background. By the end, you've heard every instrument, but they've all come to form a cohesive number that keeps the audience engaged. This is exactly how characters work in Xenoblade Chronicles 2, as well as many other story-driven JRPGs. Too often, extreme detail is used as an answer to creating an honest and believable character. It's more about the way a character acts and an exposition of the details of their life. Take the first 5 minutes of the Studio Ghibli film From Up on Poppy Hill. We see Umi bounce down the stairs and run into her daily life, doing the things she normally does. There's a hop in her step that displays her unique personality and charm without a single spoken line. I'm not a believer in the universality of show, don't tell, but there are certain instances where doing this is extremely effective. Metal Gear Solid 5 develops Snake through facial animations. Instead of monologuing each emotion, it shows those emotions through reactions. Similarly, the characters in Dragon Quest XI are developed through their unique desires for action. Eric, your first ally, is a deft and cunning thief, and this drives each line of dialogue and everything he wants to do. His personality drives his ambitions and actions. You're never given an explanation of who he is per se, but these clear personality traits are developed through the context and the ways you meet and through all of his dialogue and slight vocal inflections. The nuances of the vocal performance in Dragon Quest XI are so airtight that each character becomes uncannily memorable and engaging. Many times the story will define the characters, but other times the characters drive the story, and neither is inherently better than the other, as the most crucial aspect of any character is the way they're written. Every character has an arc, and it's important for the character to have a coherent and complete conclusion that satisfies the specific purpose they've had. Whether or not this is completing the story or a personal journey, this arc is crucial. However, it's also true that a good character can suffer an incomplete arc due to poor story writing, and this would be a negative reflection on the story more so than the character. I want to briefly discuss some of my favorite character moments in select games. There'll be some spoilers, so I'll have a spoiler tag in the game listed in the bottom corners, so if you skip through, you can see exactly what game I'm talking about. I'll also have this video chaptered so you can skip through this. If you want to skip them all right now, here's a timestamp and you can go forward to that. In the Blue Lion path of Fire Emblem Three Houses, Dimitri has a sudden 180-degree shift halfway through the game. He is war-torn and devastated. He feels as if he has failed himself and his people, and he isolates through the second half of the game. The war has a very personal connection to him that the player will gradually learn about. He demands revenge, but as the game comes to an end, he meets Edelgard and realizes that she has done all these things he thought was cruel for the good of her people. He understands that Edelgard has her own unique view of justice, one that is not cruel or evil, but conflicting to his own. He sees the humanity in Edelgard again, and despite this, they have a continued conflict. At the very end, in the final scene, after he emerges victorious over her, Dimitri reaches out to Edelgard and tries to save her, but she takes this opportunity to stab him. Once again, he does not flinch before killing her. He's a broken man, and he understands that his desires and the needs of his people did not align. It's a somber conclusion. His own desire has become extinct, but he still succeeded, and he leaves the chamber knowing that he has done what he needs to do for his people, and he needs to rise and rule over them. In Xenoblade 2, Rex fights because he believes there's good in the world. He's a crippling optimist, and even when everything falls apart and he suffers defeat after defeat, he still stands up and continues to fight. Finally, when he loses Pyra, this optimism completely dies. Their relationship had been built firmly over the course of the game, so this loss is devastating to him. He's still a kid and he doesn't know where to go anymore, so he just gives up on the world. A world where he does not see any potential good anymore. He tries to leave and return to a simple, uninvolved life. This moment begins the second half of his arc, as the other party members force him back into the mission and make him connect with the world again. In the first Xenoblade, Shulk's journey is one of revenge. He lost Fiora and his colony was devastated. He leaves not to help anyone or do any good. He simply wants to kill the Mechon that killed Fiora. We see him grow through the story, but when he comes to face with this Mechon again later, we realize his ambitions have not changed. The world around him has changed, it's moving closer to war, and this war is Shulk's fault. His selfishness has brought everyone in Bionis and Mechonis into danger. In this moment, sword in hand, Shulk is questioned about his ambitions. It's the perfect moment for him to explain that he now fights for the safety of everyone on Bionis. But he explains just the opposite. He explains he is still fighting solely for personal revenge. The final case of Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney, Justice for All, is very personal for Phoenix, as Maya has been kidnapped and now he's torn between Justice and Maya. In the end, there are two split paths, one where he manages to find the criminal guilty while still saving Maya, and one where he gets an innocent verdict for his client, the criminal. The second path sees Phoenix run away from his office. He doesn't even check in on Maya. He just leaves. Out of devastation, he doesn't understand his purpose to life anymore. The point at which characterization gets messy is when a game has a self-insert protagonist or a set protagonist with dialogue and action options. Both of these are entirely valid. There are great games that do both of these, but when you combine the two, the character falls apart. In Assassin's Creed Odyssey, you take the role of Alexios or Cassandra. These are set characters in the world, yet their dialogue options are extremely varied to give the player a choice in how they tackle the game. While this sounds good on paper, there are conflicting design philosophies at play. The character suddenly gets injected with your soul, not theirs. These dialogue options or actions no way resemble who they are. They represent you. Compare this to Skyrim, where you have a similar variety of options. You get to decide the character's identity. It works in Skyrim because you are your character. You design your character. That character is you, so you make your own decisions. In Odyssey, these characters are not you. They have already been set, but they act based on the way you choose to act. Compare this again to a game like Witcher 3 or Detroit Become Human. In both, you take the role of a set character and you have various dialogue options, but the dialogue options are always, without fail, rooted in that character. They are still things the character would say. Their morality and motivation doesn't suddenly change by your command. You choose what they say, but they are still themselves. But despite the importance of consistency in a character, the character can succeed or fail solely based on their design, the way they look. At the start of the video, I mentioned Mario, Pikachu, Pac-Man, Sonic, Luigi, and Princess Peach, as all these characters are commonly recognized by general populations. This is due in part to their great designs. A child could draw any of these characters, and you'd still have a reasonable guess as to who it was. If these characters are silhouetted, chances are, again, you would still recognize them. This immediately makes the characters so much more easy to monetize and consume. While most of them are simple, they are effective for their intended purposes in each of their games and any other form of media. It's also very important for the design of a character to visually represent the character and their ideology. Take Dimitri from Fire Emblem Three Houses, for example. His outfit is very pulled together and formal in the first half of the game. He embodies the essence of heroic royalty. He always stands upright and presents himself in a noble way. But then, in the second half of the game, his armor is much stronger, and the cape he wears is messy. He has an eye patch covering his eye, and his hair is longer. He looks and acts much less dignified. He no longer stands upright all the time. He always has his knees bent and is prepared for battle. His eye patch signifies that he is missing something now. His hair also works cohesively with this. During his least hopeful moments, his hair will cover his eye as well. If we look at the rebooted Tomb Raider series of games, Lara Croft's design is effective in showing the new version of the character. Because she is wearing a shirt without sleeves, we can see her arms, and throughout the game after brutal set pieces, you can visually see the damage to her body through her arms. At the same time, she's wearing several belts, holding different weapons and arrows for her bow. This shows her survivalist side. She prepares herself to overcome tough obstacles. Through this, we see her humanity, how the survival causes physical damage to her, but we see her heroics in that she's always prepared and continues to fight. However, in modern day society, character design sometimes treads a fine line between effective visual imagery and sexualization. This matter is quite a substantial one, and would take so much more time than this video is to fully explore. For some characters, sexual in nature makes sense. I'm thinking about characters like Bayonetta, whose way of dressing and acting matches her personality. However, and perhaps the most controversial sexualization in recent years, is Pyra and Mithra from Xenoblade Chronicles 2. While there are many female characters in this game, it's these two that are scrutinized the most, and I think it's partially unfair to the character designers to overlook the other half of their work. Let's look at Morag and Nia. They're both modest but extremely effective designs that match their characters flawlessly. Of course, when you hire Saito Masatsugo as your character artist, it's unsurprising that there is some controversy with some of the characters. In an interview, he explained that the design for Pyra was intended to signify incompleteness, which is why the back of her outfit was removed. She is supposed to be representative of a passionate flame that is comforting to Rex, and this character design is ultimately effective at conveying who Pyra is. And though the case of sexualization could still be discussed, I do not believe it to be uniformly relevant. At the end of the day, the characters of a story can help better immerse the player in the world, whether it's through self-created characters, relatability, or player engagement. The character can often be the most memorable part of any given game. It's a crucial part of the industry, and a significant factor in storytelling. There's so many slightly different personality quirks and new identities in the world that we'll never run out of unique characters to fall in love with.